Hey everybody, welcome, welcome. On the Gettysburg battlefield, it's Gettysburg 161, and you're with the American Battlefield Trust as we walk around the battlefield in a sort of new approach to try to show you more of the battlefield than we ever have before. And we're going to take a longish walk and show you a bunch of stuff and do some talking along the way. We'll look forward to seeing your comments on this and try to respond to them if we are able. I'm Gary Edelman. We got Chris White behind the camera, Sarah Kay Byerly over there. And as we start to walk, let me bring on a guy who I probably should bring on. He's my boss. This is David Duncan. He is president of the American Battlefield Trust. Did I leave the CEO part off there?
That's okay.
Okay, good. So I still have a job?
You do.
Excellent, good. David, we're going to turn around and do a little walking toward Big Round Top as we start our walk, but maybe talk about why it's important to preserve these places.
Well, thank you, Gary. Yeah, obviously we're all here because we care about American history and preserving battlefields, but especially a place like Gettysburg. There is no better outdoor classroom that you could come to for yourself or bring a young person to. And we've all seen what has happened to how history is being communicated in our country today. And I'm not usually dressed like this to go out on a battlefield, usually a little less formally attired, but I had a meeting this morning, and part of that meeting was about thinking about Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, and when he said that the world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they, the soldiers, did here. I'm concerned, and I think many of you are as well, that for many people in our country, they are forgetting what they, the soldiers, did here and at other battlefields all across the country. So that's what makes a place like Gettysburg so vitally important to preserve and then educate people about what happened here so that they'll be inspired and hopefully end up to be better citizens for our country going forward. So to me, that's why a place like this is so important. I'm so happy to come back and be in Gettysburg any chance I get.
Awesome, David. It almost sounds like you've talked about this stuff before. Pretty well done. By the way, so there's a few things to see here. I see the shadow. We're in the shadow of Big Round Top up above the peach trees here. I see that the peach trees in the peach orchard are bearing fruit. Maybe you'll be able to see some of those. And as we walk around here, Chris is going to sort of pan around and we'll cue to him to show whatever he's showing. As he passes these trees, he's looking generally eastward here as we walk through this peach orchard. Of course, the peach orchard, a key piece of high ground during the battle, even higher because of the stick that Chris is using to hold it maybe almost above some of the trees here. But this is that key ground that Union General Dan Sickles did not want the enemy to occupy. So he moved out here without specific orders to do so. And of course, that really resulted in the attacks for these famous places, the Peach Orchard, the Wheat Field, Little Round Top, Devil's Den, and near the Trostle House, which is coming into view off in the distance, and to which we might make it during this particular walk here. So we're generally looking northward. Off in the distance, you're seeing Cemetery Ridge. Of course, Cemetery Ridge famous on the third day because of the fight for Pickett's charge, but of course it figures into the second day as well. Let's see what Chris is doing here. He is looking now north and west across the Emmitsburg Road. You're seeing the Sherfy Barn over there. You're seeing Seminary Ridge off in the background there. And as he goes further west there, you're looking up the Wheatfield or Millerstown Road, which surprisingly goes to Millerstown. What do you know? And you're seeing the scene of the Confederate attack. The largest attack at Gettysburg is not Pickett's charge. It's this fighting on July 2nd, 1863 here when elements of 3 different Confederate divisions attacked toward these famous places that I already mentioned. What we're going to do here is walk along the Wheatfield Road a little bit. We're going to access a path that'll take us toward the Trostle Farm and maybe provide you some views of the battlefield you usually don't get to see. One thing you're already noticing is that the peach orchard wasn't only on the top. Here it is on the right as well. So it is not just right on the top that's encircled by the road, Burney Avenue, by the way, but you're actually seeing that the peach orchard was larger and only more recently replanted in the last several decades to be more accurate to its wartime appearance.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. And as we're walking along here, I think it's always important to understand where you are on the battlefield. So the peach orchard sits on the Union left flank. And as we're down here on the left flank, this would have been an L-shaped line. So we're coming across the line, the part of the Union line that juts to the east. And you'll notice that there are a large number of Union cannons facing towards almost due south off to our right-hand side as we walk here. This is to meet the threat of James Longstreet's 14,000 or so men who are starting to deploy to the south and to the southwest of here. And they're eventually going to go up to the Valley of Death, which gets its name this day, July 2nd, 1863. They're also going to go towards Big Round Top, Little Round Top, the wheat field, which is just beyond this area of the peach orchard, and an area called Stony Hill. But whenever you come up to the Emmetsburg Road, which is directly behind us, this line then juts to the north and it follows along the Emmetsburg Road. So you have Union guns faced off to the south, towards the west, towards the kind of the northwest, and they're trying to meet threats coming in from a variety of different areas. And this line here, most of these guns were commanded by a former sailor named Freeman McGilvery, who comes out here and deploys 5 artillery batteries facing roughly due to the south. I just passed Peter Hart's 15th New York battery a little bit ago. Here's the 5th Massachusetts battery, and we're coming up on the famous 9th Mass battery.
And two things right here. We're going to cross the road after this car passes us, but let me say, first of all, we know it's windy out. We have lavalier mics we are using, and here, let me detach here. See, they have.
Is that a windscreen?
That's a windscreen, believe it or not. So we're going to cross right here and just add a couple of things. Let's cross the road right here and do a quick 360, Chris, so we can see what we're looking at. Chris is now pointing again, generally westward or northwest, and you're seeing some of that Union line jutting out. That is the right half of Sickles' line off in the distance there. So some of those monuments off in the distance, they are both marking where the Union line was, as well as some of the intense fighting that happened as the Union 3rd Corps just completely buckled when attacked from front and flank. Now, as he goes around further, you're going to see the peach orchard again, and then we're going to look a little bit further south, and the Rose Farm is going to come into view. Many people mention this in their accounts. We don't have the best accounts of all the fighting around the Rose House, but suffice to say that you have South Carolinians under Joseph Brevard Kershaw. You have Paul Semmes, who will breathe his last not far from that place as well. And right beyond this wood line here is the wheat field, and beyond that is Little Round Top. So you can see an incredible amount from here.
Yeah, and I think that some of the cool stories that come from the Rose Farm, number one, if you were out here in July 2nd, 1863, you'd hear the pinging of a bell from time to time, and it's actually the farm bell that's being hit by mini balls. And that stuck out to a few Union soldiers, hearing that pelling of that bell as it's hit one by one. Another thing to mention is that there's a lot of confusion on this part of the battlefield. Kershaw's South Carolinians at one point will be marching towards this line of cannons where we are. And there's the 9th Massachusetts in front of us. And then somebody has an errant order, and they go from line into column and expose their flank. And these Federal gunners just pour a fire into them. And then, of course, there's Paul Semmes. His cousin is probably more famous, Raphael Semmes. He's the captain of the CSS Alabama. But Paul Semmes, always dressed to impress on a battlefield. He'd wear a turban on his head, white pants sometimes, big sash around him, always with polished boots, because he always wanted to stick out to his men on a battlefield.
Good. So here we are, we're turning onto a trail most of y'all probably haven't done before. So now look, Chris is still looking east here, but if you look directly in front of us, we'll be looking toward Cemetery Ridge. So in other words, that's the Union line where it was intended to be initially on July 2nd and where it would be on July 3rd. And in that same area, there will be a massive gap created after the 3rd Corps moves forward and the 2nd Corps goes to support them. We're not going to get into great detail here, but just note that that's going to be a scene of great emergency right in front of you, and you might be able to catch glimpses of the large Pennsylvania Memorial off to your left above the Trostle Farm coming into view here. Let's give a quick pause here to reorient what we're looking at here. So now Chris is looking back out toward the Emmetsburg Road. Man, what a beautiful shot. He sees the Cadore Farm off in the distance, Cemetery Hill and Ziegler's Grove on top of the hill there. It looks like, let me see which way he's going to pan here. I'm looking for him. He's coming to the right, folks. So we're going by Cemetery Ridge over there. And again, these same trees, sometimes called Trostle's Woods, they were here during the battle. It was Dan Sickles' greatest concern that the enemy would get to these woods, get to the next woods, and he'd be right upon his line on Cemetery Ridge before he could even deal with that. Now Chris is looking through those trees, again, to those trees that separate us from the wheat field, and then he's looking toward Devil's Den and the round tops. I see Sarah scooting up close. You have anything to add at this point?
I would just jump in and add, as we were walking down, and you may catch a glimpse of it as we're panning around, there is a wheat field that has been planted. You're seeing it here in the modern view of the battlefield, and there's lots of wheat fields around the Gettysburg area in 1863, and we talk about the wheat field, which is associated with Rose's farm, and as Gary's been pointing out where it is, behind some trees, we're not able to see it at this moment, but looking at that golden field, this is what those wheat fields around Gettysburg would have looked like in the summer of 1863. The summer wheat has come in, standing tall in the field, and then here comes the battle, which is going to produce not a harvest of grain like the farmers are hoping for, but instead a harvest of death. And we were noticing as we were walking up through the wheat field, getting ready to go out to the peach orchard where we started this video, that wheat is standing about chest high. At least on me, I'm about 5'7" or so. So it is up to my chest, and we're thinking about advancing a line into that. And you're going to knock down those wheat stalks fairly quickly. You have men falling as you're going into a fight in a wheat field, but just thinking about the different types of obstacles, in this case not a severe obstacle of a wheat field. There's going to be more challenges out on the July 2nd battlefield with terrain, with streams, things like that. And as we're walking along, you can see we've just passed through a very slight lowland. We're coming up a very slight ridge. We're still out on that high ground area that Union General Dan Sickles wanted to come out and possess. But even out here, there's different roles, different things happening in the terrain, and that will play a role in this confusing fight that happens out in this area.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sarah and I talk about wheat fields a lot because people argue to us this day of just how tall was the wheat. Well, there's dwarf wheat, there's this, there's that. It's like, guess what? They said it was chest high. So I'm going with what they said, chest high, because I wasn't here. And it wasn't just one person. But Gary pointed out over here, these Trostle Woods, this is an area where part of the Union 5th Army Corps is going to go. They're going to try and reform after fighting in the wheat field. One unit that has a monument along the Wheatfield Road is called the 118th Pennsylvania. They're the Corn Exchange Regiment, go from wheat fields to cornfields. And those guys have a monument over on Stony Hill off to the right. They have one here just in front of us, and then a really cool one up on Big Round Top if you ever get a chance to go up there. And as we walk across this field towards the north, we are following in the footsteps of the famous 9th Massachusetts Battery, John Bigelow's gunners, who were picked up by the Army of the Potomac on the march north towards Gettysburg. They were not part of the Army of the Potomac when Joe Hooker starts marching in pursuit of Robert E. Lee's Army in Northern Virginia. Eventually he loses his army to George Gordon Meade, but along the way, the Army of the Potomac picks up a large number of units from the defenses of Washington, others that might have been struck by Jeb Stuart's cavalrymen. So it's a conglomeration sometimes of units. And the 9th, this is their first battle. And what's key about this terrain, if you ever walk across this trail, you'll notice behind us, their first position is now blocked from us. And as the 9th Massachusetts fired, they would retreat by recoil, let the guns roll back, and then hook up a prolong to it, which is a long rope. And as they do that, they will make their way slowly across this field. But what's key is that little mound. And they will use this mound and another one to fire solid shot straight ahead, skip it like a rock on a pond, right at some oncoming South Carolinians and Mississippians. Because it's interesting, I'm going to give the camera to Gary just for a second. So the wheat field itself, or the peach orchard salient, looks like an L. So if you look like an L like this, the Confederates will hit the L from different points. But to finally crush it, what they will do is send some Mississippians from this direction and some Mississippians from this direction, and they will act like a vice. And then they will drive north as they go up the Emmitsburg Road towards another farm in that direction called the Trostle Farm. And as they do so, the 21st Mississippi under Benjamin Humphreys, 53 years young, comes sweeping down through here. He had gone to West Point with Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee and got kicked out during the Eggnog Riot of 1827, I believe. And as they come up through here, the Mississippians are going to be slowed by this solid shot skipping at them. watch the movie The Patriot, we all love to hate it, but there is a scene where you can see cannonballs skipping across a battlefield. It's exactly what you would have seen out here on July 2nd, 1863.
And just to stay on camera, speaking of hating things here, on camera, middle name trivia here, Benjamin G.
man.
Humphrey's middle name.
I don't know, actually know it. I should know.
I only asked you because I thought you knew. Anybody? David Duncan must know it. Yep, no, he just mouthed it. It's Grub.
That's it, yeah.
There you go. Let me say a couple of things here real quick. Once, Chris noted this, and I think it's great right away looking at it, being in this terrain, which we've never filmed here before, you could see how if you're the left piece of the 9th Massachusetts versus the right piece of the 9th Massachusetts, how you're going to have different terrain to deal with. You can also see that the Confederate attempt to form a vise around it forced them to fan out, and they're all kind of heading back into the same area, which we'll get to shortly. Thirdly, and we can start walking for this, all this talk about wheat and corn and fields, you might think we're over exaggerating this, but this is what the soldiers wrote about. They came up here from Virginia, they don't know where they are, but they do know that they were in a field of wheat or corn, and therefore not only did they write how tall it was, what it looked like, if it was on a hill or not, but it was really important in that they said, that we entered a wheat field and then we entered a field of rye or timothy. It's important to know what was in which field at the time of the battle so we can better understand it, and so that the park can plant the right stuff there when they are able. I'm told, this city boy, that you can't plant corn in a field every year for 10 years. You have to rotate this stuff for the soil's benefit. But to the degree possible, I think the park really tries to make it look like it at the time of the battle, and that's not just Gettysburg, that's Antietam, that's Vicksburg and other places. So this thing about the battle being fought on farms is as real as it gets, and the soldiers recognize that intentionally or otherwise because that's what they wrote about.
Yeah, and I would add to the farm, this is a farm community. When you leave the town itself of 2,400 people, you come into the countryside and you're going to notice a ton of farms down here. You have the Sherfy Farm, the Klingel Farm, Trostle, Kadori, Bliss. All of them out here are fairly sizable farms. We're not talking hundreds and hundreds of acres of each. Some people might have had 50 acres, some 60, some just a handful. So you're having interlocking lots of lots for animals, for corn, for wheat, and of course you have to deal with fences. And there's an entire team who works here at Gettysburg just on the fences, and they do a great job to bring it back to its 1863 appearance.
I just wanted to stop one more time here to show again how this idea of defilade, of indirect fire, of being out of view, how only walking the ground can you see this. On a map, it looks like they're shooting and seeing the Confederates the whole time. I could also see a benefit for the Confederates who could be under cover of that hill, gather their nerve, get all their men, and do another charge toward these guns as they're retiring by recoil every time they shoot. So what a benefit to being out here. And I think punctuated what David said at the outset here, what they did here. Well, now we can see what they did, and here is the import of national military parks, state battlefields, and the American Battlefield Trust preserving these places.
When we look at places like this and we've dropped into an area where it's going to be hard to see what's coming at you, what's ahead of you, but also think about, with the fighting raging up on that higher ground, a lower place like this is where you might find those field dressing stations, those places of first aid for wounded soldiers. There's accounts of soldiers falling back from the battle lines with injuries, getting some bandages in places of shelter. They're not able to be real specific about where those places are, but think about that too as you come across terrain especially in the rear area of where regiments or batteries are. Is this a place where lives were being saved? We talk about the sacrifice. We can think about that in the sense of, where do you put your field hospitals that can hopefully save some lives as well?
Good. And just going on to what Sarah just said, let's keep walking here. These very boulders you're seeing here were, of course, here during the time of the battle. I don't think we need to tell you all that. But a guy named Norwood was here. He was part of the battery, and he drew a sketch showing the Trostle buildings and a particular distinctive rock. We'll try to flash that up if we have it. Chris is often just tapping away at this phone. I don't know what he's doing while we're shooting. It looks like a, computer whiz or something like that. So maybe we'll flash up the Norwood rock, and you can see what we mean as the Trostle Farm bursts upon our view now. This is one of multiple Trostle Farms here at Gettysburg. And this trail, I love that the park has opened this one up because it allows us to see not only another farm, but a farm that was photographed by Alexander Gardner and his crew. And one of my favorite things, if Chris can pause right here, is that it not only shows the farm, it not only shows a wall there, and it shows this fence over on my left here, but it shows where they come together actually. And that formed a problem for the 9th Massachusetts Battery as they got penned in this very corner that the road bisects now. You can even see in the photo that one of the limber chests has actually been upturned as they tried to break through the wall over there. So we'll try to flash that photo up as well. Of course, in the end, multiple of the guns of the 9th Mass will be overrun and captured by the Confederates, but later recaptured by the Union as the Union 12th Corps and other members of the 5th Corps came on the field. So the Confederates captured 7 cannons at Gettysburg, but had they left with all of the ones they captured, at least for a time, there would have been at least 20 or 25 cannons. The fact is, it's hard to get those things off the field, north or south.
Gary, I see a few things as we're coming up here. There's a monument here, and it says on the monument, "Monument on Culp's Hill." What's going on here?
Thank you, Sarah. Any battlefield guide that drives this enough, you immediately learn to deal with this. So it does seem like a screwy monument that just says "Monument on Culp's Hill." Well, there's a little bit to know about this. First of all, battlefields change, and this is why we have to study them over time. And if you study this battlefield, you'd learn that the road that we just crossed, United States Avenue, used to be in a form on the other side of this stone wall here. And therefore, when you came on the road and crossed that road, you would see this monument from this side, where there's a much more substantial plaque to the 150th New York Infantry. It's a large sort of engineers-looking monument on Culp's Hill. So what they were doing is saying what their actions was here. Remember how I told you the 12th Corps came out and helped to recapture Bigelow's guns. And then if you look at the back of the monument, it says "Monument on Culp's Hill" because that's where their main monument was. So thanks for tipping me in on that particular one, Sarah. I know we've already probably shown the photo by now, but you know, you can imagine some of the 80 dead horses. If you want to capture cannons, shoot the horses. And we have 80 artillery horses from Bigelow's battery killed here, and that's what forms the basis of Alexander Gardner's photos taken here. And again, these horses are too big to bury, so they gathered them together in big heaps and burned them. And if I can quote, the fetid fog of foulness that rose from the grotesque pyre cast a pall of putrefaction over the deluge of death at Gettysburg. The smell was absolutely intolerable. This whole place and everything going on to which this burning horse flesh did not help. Now, we got a couple of things to tie up with here, but let me see if Chris has anything to add.
Yeah, let me just add in what's happening real fast. So we have, it's around 6 to 7 o'clock at night. The 9th Massachusetts Battery is falling back across this field. As they make it back to this point, they think that they're about to limber up and ride off towards the safety of Cemetery Ridge, which is not much of a ridge line out there to the east of us. They are told by their brigade commander, Freeman McGilvery, that they are here now to buy time with lives. And that is that they need to establish a new line of infantry and artillery behind the camera. And to do so, the 9th Massachusetts is being sacrificed. This comes down to how much time is one life worth here on this battlefield. And this is, you'll hear this with the 1st Minnesota, you'll hear this with Pickett's Charge and other assaults on this battlefield. But the defense of Bigelow's battery becomes something of legend because they are in their first battle. They're hit from their right flank over here near where this car is sitting. They have two of their right guns, their right section of guns are refused and firing in that direction towards Mississippians. Then they're firing towards this blind knoll in front of us, towards Kershaw, South Carolinians, as well as more Mississippians. And this area is becoming closer and closer and more congested. As this happens, they'll start stacking right beside their guns, double canister, take it out of the limber chest, put it right beside the guns. And now, at the crisis moment, they're finally told they can get off the battlefield. And as they do so, the first team of guns on the left section limber up and they start riding hell for leather in that direction. And as they do so, the first gun gets stuck and flips inside of the narrow farm gate, the one gate that would lead them off the field. So the second gunner, the driver of the second gun, decides to heck with this. He turns away from the gate, lashes his horse as hard as he can, and jumps a cannon with its limber chest and case on over top of a fence. They get out of action. But what's also happening is more Union troops are coming in from this direction because George Gordon Meade is calling in help from his right over to his left, which will eventually create a problem over at Culp's Hill. But one of the units that comes over here, we just pointed out, is the 150th New York. It's their first battle, and they're another one of those units that was scooped up on the march north from the Army of the Potomac. One brand new unit never seeing action, saving another brand new unit that's never seen action on the Gettysburg battlefield.
Really well put. Now, there's so much more to cover here. We could talk about this gun with a particular nickname. We could talk more about the Trostles and about more of the action and the fact that Dan Sickles was actually desperately wounded right on the other side of the barn over there. Oh, it looks like Chris does want to show the Cora marking over here. I've seen as many theories as the day is long about what this is. It could be a government marking. It could be that people named their guns, and sometimes they named them after a sweetheart. We just don't know, but people say with great certainty what it was, so you're welcome to, because people do it all the time. But we know we can't cover everything here, and we don't even want to try, because we have shot here before, we have shot at the peach orchard before, and we encourage you to go to our YouTube channel, subscribe if you haven't already, and just look up July 2nd. You can search within our page. Look up July 2nd, look up Trostle, that's Trostle, look up peach orchard, and I think you're going to find some stuff of interest. And that goes for all of the videos we're shooting here during Gettysburg 161. We want to hear from you as to whether you like this format, seeing more of the battlefield and less of us. Don't worry, we won't take it personally. Even if you want to direct it at particular people in general. I'm not pointing at anybody anymore. Let me see if anybody in the crowd has anything else to add.
Yeah, let me just add two quick things. Number one, this is the second position of Bigelow's battery. You can follow them across the Gettysburg battlefield from the Wheatfield Road to here over to Ziegler's Grove. They have monuments in all of those positions. And last year, Gary, Doug Dowds, and myself led a battle walk out here. We filmed the whole thing. It's available on our American Battlefield Trust YouTube channel. Check that out if you want to get in-depth. We went very in-depth July 2nd for the 160th anniversary.
And it was the 160th, and now is the 1-year anniversary of that particular walk. See how time moves over a place? And I think with that, we'll end. Make sure you're telling your friends about this. Please share this video with your friends. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. More to get inspired with at battlefields.org. Thanks to David Duncan for joining us here. Thanks to Sarah. Thanks to Chris. Thank you all for watching and supporting Battlefield education and preservation.